So we're ready for that.
Okay, I will do roll. Trustee Israel?
Here.
Trustee Ross?
Here.
Member Albrecht?
Here.
Member Badgley?
Here.
Is here.
Member Bleeker?
Here.
Member Alisco?
Here.
Member Franklin?
Here.
Member Friedman?
Here.
Member Hirsch? Member Letter?
Here.
Member Matheson?
Here.
Member Popard?
Here.
Member Patak? Member Rago?
Here.
Member Skovic said she'd be late. Member Vile? Don't see Patty yet. And Member Weiss.
Yeah.
And Member Chen, Derek Chen is in a national debate competition for GBN today. So that's exciting why he won't be here.
All right, excellent. Do you want to also run, Michaela, the public comments?
Sure. This is the time up, and I see Member Vile, Patty just joined us, so I'm going to mark her as present real quick. This is the time on the agenda where members of the public who are not part of the Climate Action Plan team that are on the call right now, if you would like to speak about anything, now is your opportunity to do so, to give a couple minutes to speak. Please unmute yourself and state your name and let us know what you would like to say. Any members want to speak this evening? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any public comment, and we did not have anyone ask to be in the building tonight.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for taking an evening here to spend with us again. The agenda here, the first thing I wanted to do is just do a very high level overview of the draft plan, just kind of a walkthrough of what's in the plan, sort of structurally, if you will, not all of the details. It hasn't changed from what we issued to all of you last week, but just in case somebody hasn't really been able to kind of hunt around it, just wanted to show you the parts and pieces. And then after that, we were going to go into breakout sessions by sub-team, the 3 rounds of breakouts. And the intent with that was just to provide the team, each sub-team, an opportunity to share with each other any review comments you have, things you want to bounce off of each other, just an opportunity to identify any, any kind of significant comments you want to make sure as a team you collaborate on. So that, just provide that opportunity for feedback. I will point your attention to, on the agenda, you'll see under sub-team breakouts, there's a link to a document. As I'm kind of going through this, if you want to go get those documents ready, that's totally cool. Those documents for each breakout session, it just has a link back to the draft climate action plan, where you can put in comments directly into the PDF file, that shared document. And then there's also a link to the implementation matrix for each team. We took that implementation matrix and we broke it back into the teams so that all the teams can have them open at the same time and we won't have conflicts between the teams. So that document is linked right from the agenda. It's a document with links by sub-team. Just I wanted to call your attention to that. And I'll probably bring that up just as we go into breakout rooms also. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and just kind of walk through at a sort of a high level the review of the draft climate action plan and the parts and pieces that we have. So this climate action plan, as you can anticipate, we've got, beyond the introduction and acknowledgements and executive summary sorts of things, we have it broken into sections based on each of the sub-teams that we've been talking about all the way through, from transportation, land use, buildings and energy, waste management, water, wastewater, local food and agricultural, health and safety, green space and ecosystem health, and climate economy. So that's really the bulk of the document. In front of that, we then have an executive summary and introduction. And on the back side of that, we have a section which overviews sort of broad implementation suggestions, which is kind of like organizationally, here are some suggestions, recommendations on how you might move forward in implementing all of that great work that the sub-teams have been putting together up front. And then, of course, some appendices with some backup information. So that's the overall table of contents, if you will, for the document. In terms of the executive summary, we just walked through a little bit in terms of kind of an overview of what we're looking to accomplish, kind of reviewing our challenge, if you will, our opportunity, and the vision of this document, with a high level sort of identification of the process that we went through. And then an executive summary on the GHG emission reduction goals. Now, from our initial conversations, we threw out some recommendations, suggestions to explore for overall emission reductions. The feedback at the time, which I think was very solid, very important, very appropriate, was, well, in general, the levels feel good, but why don't we get through sort of first sense of what we think is ultimately feasible in all of the sections and see where that lands us. So there is a tweaking in that goal from that original draft suggestion way back in November. There are two changes. The first is that as we were putting this document together, we are making a suggestion that we use 2010 as the baseline year. Back in November, our initial suggestion, we were using 2018 as our baseline year. And the reason why we shifted that is just as we were sort of putting the document together, we were realizing that because we did greenhouse gas inventories reaching back to 2010, it just ended up being kind of an awkward sort of, talking about emissions that go all the way back to 2010. But then using 2018 as a baseline, and just some of the sections ended up feeling a little bit confusing to us, that we thought that there was room for confusion there. So we are suggesting that we use 2010 as the baseline, and trying to be consistent throughout this document. Everything kind of refers back to 2010. So that's kind of a procedural change, just trying to be clear. That doesn't have any impact necessarily on anything other than just what we refer back to. The second change is that, and this is a little bit harder to feel out, the total percent reduction by 2030 is a little less than what we were originally projecting. The number sounds higher. We're showing an emissions reduction of 35% below 2010. Originally, we were talking, I think it was 25% below. So the number sounds higher, but its actual value is a little bit lower in terms of total emissions, just because we've already gotten some emissions reductions between 2010 and 2018. The number 35% reduction below 2010 still gets us to a total emission reduction that is within the Paris Accord, and which falls in line with the state's stated goals and what we were talking about at the beginning. So the percentage still would meet Paris Agreement, but is not quite as a deep reduction as what we were originally sort of exploring, if that makes sense there. And so the executive summary then goes on and just sort of summarizes the strategic goals, the strategies for each of the sections. So that in a quick glance, you get a sense as to overall emissions reductions and the strategies that we're going to be implementing for mitigation and adaptation. Then moving into the introduction section, we talk a little bit about sort of how this plan supports existing documents of of Northbrook, the existing plans that the village has already put together, like the strategic sustainability plan and so forth. We talk a little bit about why we would want to do a climate action plan, what a climate action plan is, and the role of cities in that planning effort. And we also talk a little bit about some of the background research that has gone into trying to help inform some of the decisions in this process that went on. We also highlight that we suggest that we all kind of keep in mind that climate action planning is really a journey, not a document. So we like to suggest that we think of this as a living document that supports a journey. And so what that means ultimately is these are actions to get us moving forward at reasonable intervals, every couple of years or so. 2 years is actually pretty good pace, if not annual. It's important to just sort of revisit, how is the implementation going? Are any of the actions that have been implemented complete and we can take them off the list? Are any of those actions ongoing actions, but we're feeling like they're not really performing the way we would want them to, and therefore we should tweak them? Are there any new actions that should be added because there's new technology or a new situation that's arisen that gives us opportunity? So we recommend thinking of it as a living document and a journey. So we try to describe that a little bit here and later on. And then we just highlighted at a very high level the benefits of climate action planning that include everything from opportunities for economic development, for savings, more resilient community, et cetera. We then just do a very high level review of some of the climate vulnerabilities, the projected climate impacts in the community from the climate vulnerability assessment. And then we provide a high level review of, as was in the climate vulnerability assessment, the projected climate economic impacts through the end of the century for Northbrook. And then as a part of that, identifying the estimated localized cost of carbon, which we did talk about this early on in the process, but easily may have forgotten about that. And then we've identified just a high level calculation, an estimate of the potential cumulative savings in these, the plan documents, if successful implementation occurs, hitting those strategic goals, what the cumulative potential savings is. And these are actually relatively straightforward numbers. As a great example, if we are looking to reduce electricity consumption by 10%, for instance, we can simply take our average electrical cost in the community per kilowatt hour and multiply that cost by the estimated kilowatt hour savings at 10%, right? 10% savings. So that's really, these numbers are that level of calculation just based on the percentage projection savings. There's an appendix document that does talk through, show how those numbers are calculated. And I did receive a comment that maybe we can expand out a little bit more on the detail on that. We can definitely do that. We then just sort of overview the greenhouse gas inventory, where it comes from, and the breakdown by sector. We provide the greenhouse gas projections, the business as usual projections. And then we show the breakdown of the reductions included in this plan. So this is called a wedge diagram. It's a very common diagram in these sorts of plans, climate action plans, where the top line here shows, over here it shows where we've been, and then the top line shows where we would be if we don't do anything based on the business as usual projection. And then each of these pretty colored wedge pieces represent the potential reductions, the planned reductions for each of those sectors, which then shows where we would anticipate our emissions going through 2030, and how that aligns with the goal statement. And this illustrates how that gets broken down by sector. And I will pause and explain that just a little bit further in that, actually, I'm sorry, this breakdown is based on planned reductions as well as business as usual reductions, and reductions that have already occurred between 2010 and 2018. And so this kind of a donut you see in each sector. And the reason why we're illustrating this is, again, once we use 2010 as a baseline, we're just trying to help illustrate by the time we get to 2030, we are looking for a total 35% reduction based on the goal statement. A portion of that reduction in some sectors, a portion of that reduction has already occurred. Any sector where the emissions have reduced between 2010 and 2018, we already have a portion of that reduction available to us or recorded. Some of these sectors also have a decrease that might occur through business as usual. And so we want to represent that. And then there's, of course, the reduction that's expected through the plan implementation. So in each of these, in each sector, and this chart just shows overall, the amount of reduction that's in the plan, the amount of reduction that is in business as usual, and the amount of reduction that may have occurred already between since 2010. Now, when you look at it sector by sector, of course, those vary all over the place. In some of the sectors, the emissions have actually increased between 2010 and today. So the previous emissions are actually a negative. So we're having to overcome that and then continue reductions below. In some sectors, the business as usual, transportation, I believe, is one of them off the top of my head. Waste management is where business as usual would expect some increase actually between now and 2030. So we're just trying to represent that at each section. It's a little bit confusing, I think, until I try to explain that. We're just trying to capture again between 2010 and 2030. When we get to 2030, where are all those reductions coming from? Then we talk a little bit about the survey and some of the survey responses. And then we walk through the framework of the plan and again, re-illustrate the key strategies in each sector. So then for each sector itself, we have just a couple pages here with some background content, a little positioning text about why is this in a climate action plan, what's important about it, some key observations or data pieces related to the village of Northbrook specifically that relate to some of the sectors. We then talk about, we just observe a few sort of equity considerations, and the intent there is just helping us all be mindful as certain things get implemented, as we talk about certain changes, where can we be mindful of equity potentials as well as challenges related to equity that may come up in these sectors. So it's just sort of a grounding, it's intended as a grounding text. And then we have specific emissions reductions goals expressed for each section. So for instance, for transportation, just identifying the goals for transit use, the goals for reduction of VMT, the goals for increase in bike and walk, and the goals for increase in electric vehicles. Then for each section, we identify the sector goals, or excuse me, strategic goals. And then we pull out some of the relevant survey questions from the community-wide survey that was done. You may recall that survey tried to have questions that kind of related to all of the sectors. And so we're just pulling out those responses that relate to this, each sector in particular, to just illustrate alignment where appropriate with survey responses. And then we get into all the detailed actions themselves. So, and then at the end of each section, we illustrate again the breakdown of total emission reductions and where they come from, the reduction between 2010 to 2030. We show how much comes out of the actions in this CAPT plan, how much may be happening in business as usual. If it is a reduction, in some it's an increase. And then the change that may be occurring from the previous 10 years. So in this instance, this is actually an example where the previous change was an increase. Between 2010 and 2018, it went up 13.4%. So When we're all said and done with this, we're at a 71.7% remaining emissions by 2030. And then this diagram, which tries to make that maybe a little bit easier to understand graphically, where we were at in 2010, where we were at in 2018, and where we're aiming to get to by 2030 through the plan here. And then each section we have, a handful of sort of what you can do suggestions that just people on the street can do related to making changes that support the CAPT goals and plan. And then the last thing I'll try to hit before we try to move on is the implementation section. So if you did not have a chance to see this, so we've got a few sort of high level suggestions. The first is just sort of recognizing that implementation is for everyone. This is a community-wide climate action plan. So that means that, clearly the village municipality will be doing some actions and supporting things and helping to get this going. But really, to be successful as a community-wide action, we need community members to also sort of step forward and participate where appropriate for themselves and for their businesses. But so the implementation is not just about staff. It's not just about staff and village board of trustees and commissions. It's really, it's for everybody to participate in. We then have some specific recommendations related to building internal capacity. Things like, we suggest just making a policy that, all village departments are to participate in this. There's a little bit for everybody in the various sectors. So just sort of making a clear policy that participation is expected and can be integrated into business operations, and making sure that we have sustainability staff supported to help implement. There is some staff need related to that. We then talk a little bit about external support, which really kind of comes down to, establishing identifying one of the commissions or creating a new commission, whatever is appropriate to the village, but establishing a commission as the public oversight entity that would help sort of support this process. And then also creating and extending partnerships with other public entities, school district, county, watershed district, et cetera, who will be hopefully participants in supporting the climate action plan. And then we do suggest funding consideration, just maintaining an appropriate annual budget for supporting that staff, and then also just considering on an annual basis there may be special projects that the village wants to do on a given year and to support implementation, and just sort of considering that and including that in the funding process. Lastly, then we talk about implementation tools. So there are two additional implementation tools, one which you have all seen. I hope you're seeing that now, and that is the implementation matrix. So this matrix is the next iteration of the the Action Finder tool that you've all been working with. It's going to be given over to the staff once it's all cleaned up and done. It will have all of the past comments included, so that as staff are implementing something, if they wanted to, oh yeah, I remember somebody mentioned something in a comment, it'll be there. But it's also searchable by word and also collapsible based on priority actions or sectors. So it ends up being a very workable document, and can be used for implementation process, exploration of potential partners and so forth. And then the last tool, so to speak, that we've put together here is a database of example policies or ordinances. So throughout the document, there's a few actions that say explore a policy to do X, Y, and Z, explore an ordinance to do A, B, and C. And then others where just based on the types of actions that are there, we recognize, well, there's a couple of policies that might be helpful in that exploration. So we've put together a database of example policies that relate to the various, some of the various actions in the buildings and energy, transportation, food, water, waste, and green space sections. Oh, and climate economy, I forgot we had some in there. So the intent here is just to provide additional support to staff and the community as you move forward. As you run into an item, one that says explore policies, well, we're trying to help you give some areas to begin that exploration. So that's the intent for that, is just to do everything we can to help transition into implementation. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and stop babbling. Just kind of open up to see if there were any general comments, and then we'll move into, or questions, and then we'll move into the breakout rooms here.
Ted, I guess I have one general comment. Well, general overview comment. I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate all the work that you've put into this, and I appreciate the work that everybody's put into this. It's really turning into a nice report. I know that several people have turned in comments. I'm guessing that those comments have not been able to be incorporated just yet for tonight. But, you know, were there any items of major note that we should know about?
And thank you very much for the comment. And I absolutely echo the thanks for everybody's effort. It really has been a great team. And you are correct that the comments that we've received to date have not been incorporated. There are a couple that, you know, if as we received something, if it was something that I knew we could, well, let's quickly respond to that, get that in there to give people an opportunity to respond. So we've got some that have been in there, but the bulk of them have not yet been integrated. I'm not entirely sure. Actually, many of the comments are coming out in the shared PDF file. And I know that there were some comments that were put in there over the weekend and today, which I have not had a chance to see yet. Today was that kind of day. So there could be a doozy in there somewhere, but so far, they were all very thoughtful comments. There's most of them, I think, are perhaps suggestions around tweaking verbiage of actions. There were some questions, some suggestions like, hey, on the cost savings, how can, we need to articulate more how those are being calculated, what are the sources? So comments like that. I can't think off the top of my head of a significant comment that would be really important to make sure everybody hears right now.
I guess then in terms of the framework of the meeting tonight, I know we have, 25 minutes for these breakout sessions. I guess, if there weren't any real major items to be done, I'd open it up to the group. Do we feel we need to take that time, or do we feel that, we've got comments on the items we've put in there and we don't need to discuss them? I guess that would be my question.
I was going to ask something similar of the group, if there was a need for the 25 minutes or a shorter amount of time, or if any.
I have a question then. I have another thought came to me. I've already emailed Ted a couple things. It was one sentence or one idea was just not clear to me in the way it was written. If I just email that to you, Ted, is that okay? Like, this is what I would use as clarifying language?
Oh, absolutely.
Then I don't need to talk anything. I was just going to do that in my group. If I don't need to do that, I'm good.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that we receive that's a question like that, if I have not yet responded to it, our intent is to try to respond to those.
Okay.
And if somebody has lots of questions, I might say, hey, how about if we set up a phone call or something,
No, this is just one other comment in addition to the couple I sent you. Okay.
And I'll say to Ted, that he's done a wonderful job. I've sent in, a listing of questions. I believe Heather sent in some questions as well. And we're already wrapping through the responses. I don't know. I think there was only one item that we wanted to talk about that, needed to be brought back to the group, I think.
I did have a question on the timeline from tonight on until final document as well.
Michaela,
We're gonna speak to that, but let's first find out just from the collective, did anyone want to go into breakout groups or discuss any items in more detail?
I saw Len's hand go up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went through and I put my comments in a little late the last couple of days. Sorry for that, but they were mostly editorial comments. I don't think they need to be, listened to by everybody at this point. I have two general comments that I'd rather talk about if it was in the full group rather than in subgroups, more general.
That might be more beneficial. And do we want to go through person by person? I mean, I could just run down the list. Claire, I think you've expressed already. Jackie? No? Heather?
No, the only thing though I do want is I have a hard copy of it. So I did make some notes on the hard copy that I was going to talk through a little bit with the group, that my sort of bigger, more specific items I've already emailed to Ted. So I'm
Okay.
comfortable emailing him a few other comments. But if someone else isn't, feel free to speak up, obviously.
Well, if you want to, I would encourage at this point, if they are important to open up to the entire group, just let's do that. We may, if we don't have to break up into breakout groups and we're just, dealing with this discussion, I'd rather almost have that as an open group. What do you say, Michaela? Okay, that was a thumbs up. Corey? Do you need to go into breakout?
No, I had a problem with the mute button, sorry.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, John?
Well, my question is kind of about this. I think Ted mentioned something about a new commission. And I guess that kind of came out of the blue. And to me, because I was thinking in terms of the existing conditions contributing. And I did it looks like the EQC is going to bear the brunt of implementation as far as commissions go. And there's other commissions that aren't tasked yet. And I'm just thinking there ought to be some balance there. I'm not sure who can make that call.
That is actually something that I opened up a discussion with our president-elect Cecila over the weekend with. And so it's a valid discussion, but it really doesn't hit this document. So is there anything that you wanted to, hit a breakout session for, John?
No,
Okay.
I'm
Tessa?
No.
Matt?
I don't need to go into a breakout session. I think we're good.
Okay. Sandy?
I'm just wondering if anyone has comments relating to a particular couple of strategies or whatever in a particular subgroup that should be discussed among the people who have the history of developing that. And if we just do away with that and open it up to the whole group, yeah, the whole group certainly has value, but the people who actually have been working on that all these months and months, it might be worthwhile to focus in on the subgroups.
Sandy, and that's kind of why I'm asking, do you have a particular subgroup that you do want to have a meeting with tonight?
Maybe waste management.
Okay.
That was,
Why don't we do that at the end of this rather than doing the breakout first?
okay.
And then, people can participate or not.
Because there's some items that, I was not in a sub team for that I've question the language that I would prefer to raise. So I would maybe stick around for that myself, and I'm not in that sub-team. So.
I would think it would, those kinds of things actually may benefit those who want to hang around or those who are interested. So I'd almost say let's have a session at the end. Swati?
I don't have any comments at this time. No.
Okay. Pat?
I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody has added, since we've got the base document now without any of the changes that everybody's requested. I'd rather see them all at the end rather than spend 25 minutes putting things in that have already been put in. And I've got a few that I'm gonna email in after this. So,
okay.
And I haven't looked at anybody else's other than the 3 I was in already.
That's fair. Jill?
I had a few things that I could email, but I kind of feel the same way Sandy expressed, that there's some little detail things within specifically the waste management group that I thought might be more productive to talk about with the people who have already been discussing it.
Then let's have a waste management breakout. I think let's do that at the end of this. Nell? God bless you.
Thanks. I'm indifferent.
You're indifferent. Len? I don't, you're muted.
No, I think I went first, and I'm fine without the breakout session.
Okay, Kelly?
I'm fine without. I've got some comments that I've jotted down on my not environmentally friendly paper copies that I need to get to people.
Is there a specific subsection that you need to go through with the group, or no?
No, nothing major.
Okay. Joan?
No, I'm good. Will we see a final after this, or is this our last kind of look to make any editorial type things, or will we see it again after the new changes and comments, and like waste management is speaking today? So is that coming back out, or is this our last opportunity?
I'll let Michaela go.
Yeah, so let's go through the group and I'm gonna explain what happens next.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Madeline?
I'm okay without a group, but sounds like we're having it, so that's fine.
Okay, Steve?
I'm fine without breakout groups.
Okay, Patty?
I'm fine without breakout groups, but if waste management is brought up, I want to participate in that at the end.
We are gonna do that. Becky?
I am fine not doing the breakouts, but we'll also join waste management at the end.
Okay, great. Frank?
I'm fine without breakouts. Also, I exchanged a couple of emails with Ted, so I'm good. Thanks.
Excellent. So, Michaela, I think that's everybody. So if you want to go through kind of the process where we go next.
Yeah, so I spoke with Ted this morning and kind of got a feel for how other communities, what have been their next steps along, and took that and processed it along with kind of how Northbrook traditionally will handle plans of this nature and how Northbrook does business. And so once the climate action plan edits from this evening, and I'm not sure, one thing, Ted, that we didn't hit on is how much longer would this be up for everyone? Because I too did not do a sustainable thing. I wrote my notes on paper while I was sick for my second COVID shot. So I need to go actually put them into the document still. So do we have maybe through to this coming weekend to the next Monday, to say, get all your edits in by, a week from today?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We can adjust that to whatever the team needs, but we'll say a week and then we can see if that needs to be more.
Yeah. So once everyone has their notes in, Pale Blue Dot will clean it up. And then that's it. And in a sense that that's the document that we're going to share with the Board of Trustees. That's the document that is going to get posted online on the village website, on some sort of a website accessible from the village website to be accessed by the public. That is when the public can start to review it. Ted explained that there's a way that it can be posted online so that after a member of the public reads each section, they can comment on the webpage. It's not a back and forth dialogue with other members of the public, but they can provide their feedback on that section online. Then we will have a public meeting, not a public hearing, but a public meeting while that is available online, whereupon village staff and Ted, and if other members of this team want to sit in, you're welcome to. Ted's going to just kind of walk through the plan, how it came to be, what it is, similar to the beginning of the meeting this evening, for members of the public to get an understanding of that. If there are basic questions that come up from the public, we can try and answer that. It's not a public hearing, so it's not going to be a dialogue or a forum for the public to vet their ideas or concerns or issues. They'll be directed to go back and put that feedback online where it's available. All the commentary that's received online can be put together. That information, along with the document, will then go to the Board of Trustees for a public hearing. At that point, let's say really significant a majority of the public comes out and they say, completely get rid of waste management. We do not want waste management as part of the climate action plan. And okay, well, we're going to probably need to reconvene the climate action plan team and have a discussion about what the comments were that came up that resulted in such a drastic change to the plan that this group worked on. Really big changes like that would probably be what would require the group to reconvene and have a dialogue before the plan that everyone here put so much work into would be dramatically altered. Public comment that results in minor changes, tweaks to action items, we would not reconvene the group for that. So that is where we're at. And then following the public hearing by the Board of Trustees, it's up to the village board to decide, do they choose to adopt this plan in a formal manner? Do they choose to accept the plan? There's precedent customarily where the village board accepts the plan. They accept the stormwater plan. I'm trying to remember, I think it was like I don't remember if it was the downtown plan. There was another plan that was accepted.
Right.
Where it's recognized and you do what you can with it. And then along those lines, in the draft budget going before the Board of Trustees tomorrow for approval, is a full-time position of a sustainability coordinator for the village of Northbrook. That person, that position being approved, then that employee, it would be their task to continue forward with this plan and the action items. And part of that being also working with the other entities in the community, such as the park district, the library, the school districts, get them to maybe do a resolution accepting the plan and deciding to also, in their decision-making, in their organizations moving forward, how can they adopt some of these action items? How can they work with the village, with the community, and continue on a path forward to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and everything. So that is next steps in a nutshell.
Everybody get that? So I think, Heather, you had some comments you said you wanted to vet in front of the entire group.
Well, I'm actually, I don't think that's necessary. I think I can just email. I think they're small enough. They're little.
Okay.
So I will email Ted. Although, from looking through some of the comments, like I think Sandy raised some really good points that I think we might want to talk about as a group if she's okay, with that. I don't know if anyone's looked at some of her comments, but like, for example, and this was going through my head as well, this sort of tension or inconsistency between doing more dense development on the one hand, but trying to keep, a place like Green Acres as green as you can on the other hand. And maybe Ted can speak to that a little. Like if you have green spaces in a village, there's, obviously big advantages to keeping it green, but I understand the feeling of cutting down on transportation if when you're developing, the areas you're developing are a little bit denser so that people, hopefully more people can maybe live closer to where they work, especially with ADUs and stuff like that.
Can I just say
Sandy,
something briefly on that? Because it was in the transportation section and that was my section. And I've already sent Ted an email about that. When we discussed it, it wasn't density throughout the village. It was meant to be density by transit centers and to the downtown. So Ted changed the language to like, I can't remember your distance, and we can talk about that, of course, but I think it was within 3/4 of a mile of the train station. So it wasn't our thought that it was going to be everywhere. And point well taken, Sandy. It was that it was going to be to increase transit usership.
Yeah,
So
that's
density by transit.
That is correct. The potential change that I plugged into under the comments section of the matrix was now saying amend the zoning ordinance to allow and encourage higher density development within the downtown district and within 3/4 mile radius of transit centers. And then I think the rest of it is just a clarification statement here, but yeah.
And Ted, I didn't know 3/4 mile, whatever, if the group thinks it should be smaller, but yeah.
And the 3/4 mile was there, I picked that only because there was an earlier action that was talking about encouraging walking and biking to the transit center within a 3/4 mile radius. And so it seemed to relate, but it could be something else.
And I believe that's the distance that was adopted in the Metro TOD plan that was done several years back.
If I could just add my 2 cents from the Plan Commission, the downtown plan, which has not been formally adopted, suggested increase, and we pretty much use the Village Green overlay as the boundaries. And that's not a universal dimension. It's a irregular shape item that's been determined as our downtown. And then the zoning that we've been changing that has not been finalized yet to support the downtown plan also calls for higher density. I mean, with residential up to 5 stories, I mean, it's got high density built into it. If we ever get back to it, refine it and pass it. And again, that definition has always been using the downtown, the Village Green overlay.
Okay. So does that address that question, I guess, Heather?
I think it helps me. What about you, Sandy?
Yeah, that definitely helps me. I just think it's real important that we bear in mind our recent history in grappling with these issues and not put out these really wonderful sounding things that sound great in a vacuum. And to the extent that the language is refined, I think that's great. So thank you.
Okay. And I think the next thing that was left was really to go into a breakout session for waste management, Sandy. I mean, do you want to have it with the entirety of the group, or I mean, I think the group can comment.
I think it's up to the group. Whatever they want to do is fine with me.
Okay. This is a major breakout section for waste management. You're on.
Okay.
I trust you. I'm gonna say goodbye. Sandy, I trust you. Do what you must with the waste management. I'm gonna be sending my comments to Ted when I get out of the meeting, so.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Ted. Thank you, village board members who've helped us, and thank you staff, because I know night meetings on top of a long day are tough. Thank you.
Right.
I will also defer to the subgroup for waste management. Looking forward to see what their final thing is before I give any comments on it. I'd like to read it then.
Okay.
Have a good night. Thanks for including me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Sandy?
Okay, sure. So I was just, my concern is that we have these numerical goals, and I don't know that the actions that we've come up with are going to really meet those goals. So for example, I'm really looking at what I think is a great goal, which is strategy number 4, decrease total per capita municipal solid waste handled by 5% by 2030. I think that's a really fabulous goal to have. And what we've got are just 2 actions, if I'm reading this correctly, and I think I am. And the 2 actions, it's on page 4-6, phase out single-use products like plastic bags, utensils, and takeout containers, and encourage restaurants to use sustainable takeout foodware. Those are both great things to do. Sure, I wouldn't argue with either of those, but do we really think that those 2 actions are going to get us to a 5% reduction in total per capita municipal waste by 2030? There's just this disconnect here. We've got this sound good, feel good kind of stuff going on, and I don't see how it gets us to our goals. And I was just wondering if anyone else had that same thought.
If I may, I think it's a great point, a great question. There are, for that goal in particular, I think that there is some potential overlap in terms of contributions from some of the other actions. For instance, in like conducting waste audits to determine waste diversion opportunities, in the waste diversion, in that sort of audit and effort, as identification happens for potential waste diversion, some of those can be waste reduction potentials. One of the actions, and I'm not remembering the number, I'm sorry, talks about, oh, actually, here it is, WM2-2, develop and fund an assistance program for businesses to provide waste audit services. I won't read the whole thing, but basically in that action, it's trying to provide support for businesses to explore, what can they do from a business case perspective to reduce their waste, increase recycling on a very strategic sort of basis. And at a business level, being able to focus that in terms of reduction of waste means reduction of costs. Where can we do that? And typically what you'll find is that some of that's through recycling, and some of it may also be in just reduction of waste generation, which is good for the business, because if waste is waste money, really, ultimately.
Right, and again, increasing recycling is one of those things that sounds really good, but in reality, we really don't know what's happening with what we put into recycling. We don't know what the vendors are doing with it. It seems to me we really need to be working way harder on reducing and getting people to actually reduce what they're using, reduce actual use, and therefore have less waste. And recycling is great if it works, and we don't know that it works. So it's a really good second stage, but it shouldn't be our primary.
I love that. Actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. I think what I'd like to do is add a WM4-3, which would be similar to 4-1, but would hit on the production side, so that we're working with the food, shopping, the stores, particularly food stores, as I understand it, to try to reduce packaging and get rid of single-use packaging on the production side, so that we are not having to recycle it on the discardment side. Is that something like what you're talking about? And where else would we use something like that in terms of packaging?
Heather, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to suggest, Bob, based on the article that you sent this morning from the Tribune, it could also include like food. There was a great article that that Bob sent me, and I only sent it to local food group. I can send it on to everyone else in the Trib this morning, that talked about how much money grocery stores could be saving if they invested in more technology to really figure out what is sold, so that they're not stocking their shelves with so much extra that eventually becomes waste. And same with restaurants. So it's not even necessarily the plastic, it could be the food as well. And so that was one of the items I had emailed Ted about, going in the local like food group, but maybe that fits better in here, or maybe it's in both.
Maybe.
Well, and I think the decrease of per capita waste with some of this, like what Trustee Ross is saying, some of these action items in other groups will help result in that, even though some of these action items to, encourage composting and all aren't directly under item 4, they are getting hit elsewhere.
So then I guess I have a question. If certain actions go to more than one strategy, which I guess is fine, how do we monitor how well we're doing? How are we going to know in 2024, if we're in 2027, if we're making the progress we need to be making, if these actions aren't one-on-one correlation?
So I guess, and Madeline, correct me if I'm wrong, or Tessa, but the staff here right now is already monitoring the percentage of waste, of recycling, and of compost, and of e-waste, and textile, the various forms of disposal in town. And so as those metrics, we would hope, as different programming and action items are implemented, you'd start to see a shift in all of those metrics. So then you would know, all right, well, we rolled out this program for the past few months. Here's how things have changed. And we've started to see a decrease in the solid waste.
So it's my understanding that that data is only for residential, that there's no commercial and industrial. And that, again, has just been one of our big challenges from the get-go, is because the commercial and industrial are all served by different private waste haulers. We don't get that data because they don't contract with the village of Northbrook. So again, how will we know how we're doing?
And I would say that would be incumbent on the board, either to, Madeline, you and I were talking about this today, either figure out a way by licensing agreement of those waste haulers that are licensed to be in the village and to operate in the village, and put the burden on them to provide that audit trail and those numbers by an address basis, I guess, in order to be able to track that.
Should that be an action item? I mean, we've got waste audits. I think that's for individual businesses or residents, but do we need an action item about actually controlling our vendors, whether it be waste management for the residential or whomever?
I think we can leave I think that the intent is contained in the document. And if, you know, the action, the desired action is there, you know, how to implement it can be done or can be navigated by staff, this new sustainability position with, you know, with the village board. I think that's probably a way to address it.
Do we have a means by which the board will know that this is what CAP meant and will know to instruct this employee accordingly? I don't know how those communications work. So you are all much more familiar with that than I am. I'm so afraid that this is going to be one of these things that sound so great. And we're all going to pat ourselves on the back, and then the instruction's not going to get actually passed along. And it's one of these things that then sits on the shelf.
We've said that one of the actions is to provide that audit information. You know, I think it's incumbent upon the board and staff to figure out how to implement that. Okay. I don't think that diving, I guess as Michaela would say, down that rabbit hole into the machinations at this point is absolutely necessary. I'm sure Michaela will keep us honest and, you know, keep us on track for that.
And if I may also just expand that just a tidge, in the implementation section under our overall recommendations, where we talk about reviewing progress on a regular basis, we say 1 to 2 years. That's kind of common, but it can be, you know, the village could decide to make it 3 years or whatever. But in that, we also say a review is reestablish the current GHG inventory and take a review of the implementation of the various actions that have been implemented and what's coming up next. And so when you do the GHG inventory, you will capture all the same data that was captured originally. And Bob's suggestion here of having something tagged into the hauler license is fantastic, because that'll get you improved data moving forward. So.
Okay, I just want to say, and we had something similar to that in the existing advanced disposal, I think was the vendor. And there were actually FOIA requests sent to the village looking for that data, and it was determined that the data didn't exist because even though it was in the vendor's contract, the vendor wasn't doing it and no one was checking up on them to make sure they did it. So I'm just saying we do have a history that there has been this problem before.
Yes, we recognize that, and we will work to try to fix it.
Bob, can I throw in a bigger picture? I think Sandy's points are all good. I think they apply to all sectors. And my broad question was, do we have a reality check on our ability to meet all of our goals? And if we do, we should probably have some statements to that effect of how we would say that we could meet these goals. Maybe, Ted, it's, you know, we've worked on 25 of these throughout the country, and 22 of them have met their goals in 10 years, you know, and they're similar to you or something. I know it's not going to be mathematically possible to say it's perfect, but because we do have things like, well, we'll convert 20% of our fleet to electric cars, you know, in 10 years. Same thing as Sandy said, it's a great goal and it sounds good. And we could probably measure that one, but can we measure how likely it is that it's actually going to be achieved? And so that we're not just a paper process here. And if we can look at it, and maybe I missed that, you know, there are a few pages in this draft report, and I don't know that I read every single one of them, but if we can have something that gives us hope that we're going to be able to back up what we say. That would be great. The other general comment, if I can, is how our CAPT fits into the bigger picture, you know. And I don't know if we have anything in there that says, well, Northbrook is doing theirs. The 25 communities that surround us or in the 50-mile radius around us are doing their CAPs at the same time. What percentage of the country is doing a CAP, and how do we fit into the world order? How does, do we know if Africa is doing anything? Or
Well, let's do some city shaming out there.
well, and it doesn't, we don't have to name names, just be nice to say, you know, we're a small part, but we're one of the many grains of sand on the beach, and there are a lot of them getting together.
Agreed.
Now I'll let those were my two global comments that I wanted to throw in.
Here. Sandy, I'm going to share my screen for just a minute. Can you guys see the waste? Can you see that now? I've put in a yellow line, WM 4-3, phase out single-use products and limit packaging by 2026 at points of sale. This would apply to, but not limited to, bags, both paper and plastic, containers and boxes. Applies to businesses of any size. Does that? What do you think of that? I think you're muted.
I'm trying to understand it. So you go to the hardware store and you pick up a couple of items. Are you saying they don't put it in a bag for you? Is that what that's about? Or is that the packaging on the items themselves?
I'd like to figure out a way of reducing packaging of items into the store that you're then putting in bags and taking away. So the lettuce boxes, for example, people go to stores, get a box of lettuce or a box of spinach, the plastic see-through things. Those, as I understand it, many of those are single-use plastic. They say that they can be recycled, but the likelihood of them being recycled, and the fact is that they're not being recycled, means that they will end up into a dump and they will land there for the next 200 years. So if we can figure out a way of convincing our stores, grocery stores, our hardware stores, of reducing packaging, then I think we'd be better off eliminating it from the recycling stream.
How is that item WM 4-3 different from WM 4-1 above it?
4-1 above it is for primarily bags, utensils, and restaurant stuff. And stores, bags at stores.
I'm just a bit curious if how that would be possible WM 4-3, because how much control? I'm just trying to think of like I guess for maybe like small businesses that have a little bit more control over I'm thinking of like small restaurants that have control of like what kind of like takeaway plastic that they use. It might be easy, but for things like chain or like big companies, I don't know how much control, and I mean, don't really know much about this, but like how much control that we have over what is packaged.
I was thinking that also. I agree with Nell. I think even our grocery stores like Sunset, they are going to buy their produce or whatever from vendors. Now, one thing they can control is when they sell individually packaged things that they package with the styrofoam tray and the plastic wrap over that. They don't have to have, when they package it themselves, then they have control over the packaging. And I've often wondered why they have to use styrofoam trays, and how can we get them to use fewer styrofoam trays when there are even biodegradable, alternatives available, although more expensive. But it's got to be, if we're going to do something like that, which I like, it's got to be something that is within the control of the business. In a hardware store, if they get packages that they put on the shelf, it comes in whatever packaging it comes from whatever supplier they're getting it from. And that's a great thing, but it's it seems like a really hard thing to control on a village level. It would be something for organizations to petition, excuse me, or try to work with corporations who do the packaging, as opposed to our stores and local business who sell what the corporations send them.
Well, if we encourage our store, my thought is if we encourage the stores encourage the producers. That's the hierarchy. If I go to somebody and tell them you should use less packaging, I have zero power. However, if Ace Hardware, if Sunset, which is a subset of another large, they buy all of their stuff through some producer, is called out for using styrofoam on their own things, is called out for, the packaging in those plastic boxes, then maybe you start a movement towards a reduction in production of those things so they don't enter the recycling chain.
Yeah, I think that there is like a possibility of reduction. Like I just think like when I'm hearing about this, like mainly about Sunset Foods is like the one example that I go to. And I think that there's like if you go and like serve yourself something that they have made, like there might be some control over what you're able to use to like package that sort of thing or take it away. Or if you think about like smaller businesses that have, or like restaurants specifically that have like packaging that they might decide, I just think it might need a bit more consideration, and there could be like other ways. I think that this is something that was mentioned earlier, like reduction, but at a personal level, because I'm not sure just how much like we will be able to impact something that's like a huge corporation. And there can be an attempt, but like I guess I'm still a bit confused as to what you're saying in terms of like encouraging or like, I don't know. I just think that there are multiple ways to approach decreasing municipal solid waste that don't necessarily, like there can be like a personal or like a incentivized way to do this, but I'm just not sure that this would be something that would be possible or effective.
I think along the lines with what Nell is saying, that kind of goes with what Trustee Israel has written here, might be encouraging the reduction of single-use products across the board. It's not just, it starts with the individuals choosing to not use single-use products, and then taking it a step further and how you choose to purchase the products you are going to acquire, and start limiting it in that regard. And I know the village has put together informational pieces on social media, don't use this, use that type stuff, to show how much single-use products everyone uses on a daily basis and how you can simply switch from a single-use product to another. So it might be something about just the reduction of single-use products in general across the board, and then action items being reminding people of all the single-use products that are used on a daily basis and how you can swap them out with a green alternative.
I would like to chime in here. I really appreciate this discussion. And I think all strategies are important. So it's not only, I think the point of putting some responsibility on the producer and on the vendor is really important, in addition to educating the consumer about their choices. So if the grocery stores are selling, or other food stores are selling produce that is, they're putting their packaging at the store, like putting 4 bell peppers together and wrapping them in plastic, as opposed to just selling them loose. This is something that is an unnecessary use of packaging that is single use. And I think that the point of this WM 4.3 is to discourage the stores, or even, if possible, prohibit the stores from doing that kind of unnecessary packaging. Same thing with like bagging onions in a plastic net bag. You can buy them loose. Maybe people want to just buy them loose and put them in their own produce bag. So I do think this is an important addition to the plan. And
Is there a better way of saying it?
I think it could be, I think we can refine it. I don't know if I can refine it on the spot, but I'll look at it.
Okay. Here, what I'll do is how about I put this language in the chat, and if we, let's see, where'd my chat box go?
I think I'll just add one more thing, which is that while you're doing that, which is that I think that doing this is really important because people buy what's available to them.
Right.
And if there are more bulk options available, then like there used to always be, then consumers will just naturally change. And there is, in the section above in WM 3.5, there is some language about
Combating food waste.
Zero waste sections, right?
Right.
Zero waste sections. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of a similar thing. You don't need to package produce. Produce has its own. It's just not. It's just an odd.
I think one thing I would like.
convention.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you were done. One thing I'd like to do is put a WM3 and WM4 ahead of WM2, because WM3 and 4 both, I think, refer to reduction in use. Maybe not WM3 so much, but I just think that reduction in use, which is what WM4 is about, should be way more important than recycling, because it's more likely to actually bring about the result that we want. Recycling is kind of a wish and a hope. Reduction is something I think we can actually do.
Yes.
So I would prioritize something that's reduction over something that's recycling.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, I pulled out my environmental science notes from my class, and I was just looking at, we learned about the waste stream, and there are like really big things we can do and really small things we can do. And it just reminded me that even just thinking about reducing waste as a part of the waste management thing, a lot of different aspects, like I'm just thinking about the food group, even like kind of go into this. So I'm looking at my notes here. You know, at the very top is making industrial practices more efficient, or minimizing packaging, like we're talking about, which are really effective, but also a lot more difficult to do. At the bottom, things like municipal composting, materials at home reducing, and reduction being the first thing, is, you know, when we think about reduce, reuse, recycle. So I really do think the right idea. I think that like it's not just this section that plays into reduction, or like I just mean like the waste management part. But yeah, I think because I feel like I kind of sounded like I was discouraging the idea of reduction at first, but I think we have the right idea.
No, I think I agree. Sandy, that's a great point. Nell, that's a great point. Ted, did that make sense to you? Basically, putting the reduced part in front of the recycle piece, so that you're catching it before it goes out. And then the recycle we recognize is not going to be overall as effective as we want it to be. We want it to be perfect, but we recognize that that's trying to catch it at the wrong end.
Yeah, and with that, as I'm understanding, taking strategy WM3 and WM4 and flip-flopping their order. Am I understanding that?
Putting them ahead. So you're putting the reduction ahead of WM1, I think it was. I'm not there yet, but
I think WM2 is the recycle, and it's too high in the order, in the pecking order.
Yeah,
that's a better way of putting it. Taking WM2, the recycling piece, put it at the end of the stream.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's swapping WM4 and WM2, flip-flopping those. Right, and also just a clarity, that order is not intended to be prioritization, but I hear and honor the idea of wanting it to represent it in a prioritization way. So we can totally flip-flop those.
Yeah, and I think realistically, when other people board and the public and other people, they're going to start reading at the top of the list, and maybe their attention goes all through to the bottom, but maybe not. And so we really have to hit the strongest points. We really have to hit first the ones that we're going to get the most bang for our buck as far as effectiveness of the action.
It would be WM4, decreased total per capita municipal solid waste. Then it would be increase, I think, WM1, and then WM3 and WM2. Is that Sandy, does that look right to you?
I like that better, but what does the rest of the group think?
I personally like the order. I also just want to say, like, I'm sorry, like these kind of seem like a little bit meaningless comments, but I think it's kind of important. But recycling is like the reduction part is most important, but it's also probably going to be the most difficult. And I think that's something that we need to consider. Like, it's gonna probably take if we think about, like, I think Sandy, you really did a good job of just like thinking out like how it's actually gonna go. It's gonna be a little bit more difficult. So I don't think, like, I think the order is good, but also just like for consideration, recycling is still important because it's going to be a little bit easier probably to encourage, and it's still a part of that waste reduction stream.
Well, and I also think no, that's a really good point. I think when you get people invested in the smaller things, like maybe they'll start composting at home, or maybe they'll remember to bring, you know, their Lululemon bag to put all their groceries in. It starts like a cycle of supporting, you know, the bigger issues. One question I have though is, Bob, in the new one we're putting in, I like the idea from that article I read today, which talks about like grocery stores, restaurants, investing more upfront to figure out what their waste might be so they can avoid it and order less products. But I don't know if that should be in waste management or should that be in local food. What do you all think?
I feel like that could almost be an action item to help with this strategy number 4 to decrease the waste. If they're, I mean, kind of to what Nell was just speaking to about, you curb the product purchased, lessen that, it's going to reduce the waste.
And it's going to save the big companies money. So there's an incentive, you know, at least according to this article, they're going to expend, you know, X amount up front, but they're going to save way more than that.
Sustainability has to be sustainable. So I agree.
Okay.
Me too.
So that could be another action under
the
M4.
Yeah, I think I need some language for that, but I think Nell, Heather, I appreciate the idea of getting people involved in this and thinking that the the biggest push on this will be by individuals, but I think incorporating producers and acknowledging their responsibility in this cycle, I think is really important. And, I'm not going to say that John Oliver scared the crap out of me. But, that is pretty effective. I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
there's so, pardon?
I just want to say I really, really agree with you. I don't know. I just like, I want there to be more discussion almost because I really, really, really want to work with what you're talking about, but I just really want to make sure it's something that can be done because it's really important, if that makes sense.
And it's gonna take some work, but I'm a big Daniel Burnham fan, and the idea make no small plans, for they have not the ability to capture men's souls and boil men's blood. And I mean men, everybody, so I'm not being sexist, I'm trying to quote. We need to have some of the bigger things in here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my point was if we get people to do some of the littler things, that might motivate them to watch John Oliver and then really jump on board for the big.
We can put in a link. Yeah.
I think what the waste management group has spent some time discussing over these months, both in email and in these meetings, is that based on things we've read and videos we've watched, that the recycling is sort of, for the most part, a feel-good thing that's not, it just makes people feel good and it doesn't change behavior.
Okay.
And it doesn't resolve or really in a meaningful way address climate change or emissions. And even if we reach or exceed our recycling goal, once that stuff is picked up from your curbside, it's not really a meaningful goal. It's only a goal that is reducing, increasing the recycling in Northbrook. It's not necessarily being recycled. It still may be ending up in the landfill or the ocean or in a developing country where impoverished people are sorting our American high-end trash, so that we think is recycling. And so I think it's important to be mindful of the realities of recycling and not take it as a key strategy in achieving actual emissions reductions.
And to what Nell and Bob were saying, the stuff that's really worthwhile to do is rarely easy. We know this is going to be hard, but that's why we do it. Or that's why we at least strive to do it.
Right.
He said it would be easy. We just said it would be worth it.
So in the chat, Michaela, what I did again in yellow, Ted, I inserted a WM4-4 for the technology and software for determining product needs to reduce overhead waste, specifically for food waste in restaurants and grocery or specialty food stores. So
excellent.
Yeah, and if you wordsmith the specialty food stores, I was trying to figure out how do we like lump in the 7-Elevens and the Quickie Marts and anyone who's buying food and packaging food. There's all kinds of places.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I go over to Costco every once in a while and I buy something, and it takes sometimes lots of tools to get that stuff out of the packaging. And it really shouldn't. And then you have to throw it away. And that's just shouldn't be that way. So.
Well, I think to some extent that's a different issue. That's anti
theft.
Theft, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it, but
don't join Costco because nobody needs that much stuff.
but it shouldn't have to be that way. So, okay. Were there other items, Sandy, that you had for?
No, that was really, I wasn't so much as picking on particular items. I was just concerned overall that we seem to be putting too much emphasis on recycling, not enough on reduction. And I wanted to flip that.
No, that's great. Good comment. And Steve, thank you for, unparaphrasing it. So, were there any other items, I guess, that we needed to go through? Otherwise, anybody? Ted, we got a half an hour back.
No, I had one for the waste management. Sorry, because I was not part of the group and I was just curious. WM1-4, how did the group determine the language require that all real estate developments that receive financial assistance or special zoning agree to exceed the village's sustainability goal for waste diversion? The word require versus encourage. And now that I'm reading this, not with 102 fever, I'm actually probably okay with it. So
actually, I thought that we did make a comment on that to change that language.
I just thought I thought a lot of the requiring was going to become encouraging.
That's what I thought too. I thought we commented on this. It may not have been picked up.
Okay. Yeah, and then
Kind of hard to require somebody to exceed your goal. Then you've made a new goal.
Well, this is specific to real estate developments that receive financial assistance or special zoning approval. So you can pretty much require them to do what you want as part of the negotiation for the zoning change.
And if I may, just throwing out there, so when we look at overall waste diversion now, there's our biggest sectors, as best we can tell from the waste characterization study, is organics, which is important to crush down because that's a big emission section. Paper, which again is important, and some of the single-use thing, the packaging can help address that. And then construction and demolition materials. And so we do have a couple relevant actions that talk about supporting reduction of construction and demolition materials. One of, a couple of them are, for instance, let's make sure that the ordinance or state requirements are being met or exceeded. Let's make sure that we're encouraging Cook County to meet their own requirements and that those requirements are being met at project level. And just overall compliance is really important. Compliance is a challenge for everybody to just make sure that projects actually follow through on what is required at permitting level. So there are a few kind of connections in there that does make that action important for any project that fits into that category of receiving financing or special consideration. So.
Okay.
And then kind of to that same effect, there was under buildings and energy, require a solar photovoltaic site assessment as part of a building permit submission. Assessment should include estimated installation costs. So that's, and it was non-specific to what type of building. So in essence, it's saying require a solar photovoltaic site assessment as part of all building permit submissions. So anytime anyone's applying for, I just want to make sure, did we mean the word require for every building permit submission, or is it encourage?
I think, and please, if I make a mistake, group, let me know. But I think that the idea was for new buildings and major renovations that you require that to basically confirm whether or not it is it is desirable, feasible to provide solar power right from the get-go.
Okay, so but this was for all new buildings or major renovations, not all building permits.
Yeah,
I think that would be, I think that's the intent.
Yeah, if somebody's doing a deck, that's probably not what you're too worried about. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
The other thing I'll point out, you could probably, the village could probably create a couple of relationships with solar installers that would be willing to do those assessments for free, actually.
So, yeah, those you can get on Google Solar or whatever it is for like nothing.
Okay, I just want to, it was one other major one that I had circled and highlighted in a sub team I'm not a participant in, and I just was curious how the language was arrived at, but I'll go make a comment in the thing about maybe tweaking it to say all new buildings or major renovations versus all building permits, because yeah, I don't think deck permits need to.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody,
Thank
for
you all.
staying late just because I had stuff to crab about. So thank you all.
No. Thank you all for your hard work on this. This is really going, I'm very excited. I think this is going to be an amazing document. I think we're going to make John Oliver proud. I think that this is, good work, and I do appreciate it.
I need to start watching John Oliver again.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. And from my side too, thank you very much. And over the next, so we'll say, let's have a week here to just be able to translate any comments into that document. If you have any questions that come up at the time, just send me an email. I'll be as responsive as I possibly can be, but I will definitely get back to questions. So.
And what is the deadline for submitting those comments?
A week from tonight, let's say, the end of the day tomorrow, next Monday. And if in this week, if anybody feels like that's not enough time, just raise a flag and we can kind of huddle and see if we can extend that. But let's say next Monday.
And Ted, I put those couple of comments on the WM 4.3 and 4.4 highlighted. They're in the spreadsheet.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.